right. See folks coming in. Takes a moment. Good afternoon, morning. You're on the West Coast. Give this just a couple more seconds. We'll get started. All right. Well, good afternoon and welcome to our webinar for leveraging micro credentialing to advance skills-based hiring. My name is Ted Wells, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to what I think is going to be a very dynamic and interesting and informative discussion around skills-based hiring and the practice of micro-credentialing. I'm Ted Wells, I'm the president of STEMconnector, and we are a national organization focused on sustainable and impactful engagement by industry in support of the STEM workforce. Our members come from post-secondary institutions, leading nonprofits, industry, government agencies, with a shared purpose of sustainable and impactful employer engagement in support of STEM education and workforce development, with a specific focus on broadening participation of historically underrepresented groups. This, we hope, will drive innovation to improve the human condition across the globe. Our discussion today is looking at this practice of micro-credentialing around skills-based hiring. The United States, we're really at full employment right now. We've been around 4% for a long time, which means that finding labor to fill skilled roles is particularly challenging. A lot of ideas are being thrown around in terms of how do we get more than just the skilled workforce overall. And that's where this comes in. That's where this discussion is looking at, well, hey, what if we look at folks' skills, not just their degree, and maybe that'll open up more people. But then how do we ensure that we actually can tell if those skills are actually there, and if the person that we're trying to hire has those skills? So that's where this micro credentialing is sort of a chicken or an egg discussion. And I think we've got some of the best folks to help unlock that for this audience. So our panel, I'm going to go through them one by one, and then we'll kick it off with Robert. So first, Robert Bajor is the CEO and founder of Micro Credential Multiverse. He's a seasoned professional that operates at the intersection of learning experiences and career opportunities. He started off as a high school science teacher and has architected and developed and launched some of the highest quality, scalable, impactful, skills-based digital credentialing systems in the U.S. He was at Bajor, a pioneering technology business in the area of digital badges, and he also helped bring a company to a startup to acquisition. So you're going to hear from Robert in a moment. I'm just going to go through all of our panelists. And next, I'd like to welcome Sonia Malik of IBM, where she is the Global Program Director for SkillsBuild, which is one of IBM's, IBM requires no introduction, one of their primary corporate social responsibility initiatives. SkillsBuild is a free program, and you're going to hear about it from Sonia, but focused on underrepresented communities in technology that helps adult and high school learners, as well as university students and faculty, develop new skills and access career opportunities. It's an online program that's complemented by customized practical learning experiences and delivered in collaboration with a network of partners. It's in support of IBM's global skills build to skill 30 million by 2030. So you're going to hear about that, the progress towards that commitment as well. And Sonia's role at IBM, she applies her decades of leadership and programmatic expertise in the areas of enterprise learning, workforce and talent development, training delivery, partner relationship management, and global program design, development, and execution. She's responsible for the strategic development of various program elements, as well as the processes to support successful execution of the program in over 150 countries across the globe. So welcome, Sonia. And last, and certainly not least, I would like to introduce Angela Consani, who has really been one of the folks that's helped me understand this space. Angela is the CEO and co-founder of Bioscience Core Skills Institute, also BCSI. She co-founded BCSI in 2020 after more than 15 years teaching, designing courses, assessing students, and developing curriculum at the K-12 and community college level, as well as having nearly a decade of experience in the production, manufacturing, and operations. She's a former program coordinator and PI for the National Science Foundation ATE-funded Kansas City Biomanufacturing Training Laboratory, and she's responsible for teaching, curriculum, budgeting, and recruitment for a rapidly growing and effective biotech vocational technology effort in Wyandotte County, Kansas. I hope I said that right. A unique partnership between Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools and Kansas City, Kansas Community College, and which establishes pathways that leads from high schools through institutions of higher education, ultimately into professional careers in the life sciences. She serves on the University of Kansas Edwards Bioscience Workforce Education Board, the Workforce Activities Committee for Innovate Bio, which is an NSF ATE National Center for Biotech Education, and is a national co-chair for the National Institute for Innovation in Manufacturing Pharmaceuticals, also known as NIMBLE. So, we've got a great group of experts, as you can see, who are kind of swimming in different spaces, but ultimately are all connected. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it to Robert. Robert, you've spent most of your career understanding how to leverage micro-credentials to enable access to the knowledge economy. Can you give some background on what you do at Micro Credential Multiverse and just some context for our audience about how this can support greater participation in the STEM economy and access to STEM talent?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks so much, Ted. And thank you for joining me, Angela and Sonia. I'm really excited to talk to everyone today about my favorite topic, which is skills-based hiring, recognition, and employment solutions. So I've been working in this space for about a decade. I started out at Digital Promise back when it was a team of around half a dozen folks around a table. I like to think we were a two-pizza team when I joined, kind of fed everybody, and then moved over to Bajor and helped facilitate the acquisition by Instructure until finally I co-founded founded my own company here in Dallas, Texas. So worked on a lot of projects. So I've tried my best to curate kind of an introduction and a primer to this very exciting space that's rapidly evolving, which we see all the time. And without further ado, I'll just jump right into my slides with the 10 minutes or so that I have with you guys today. Okay, can you see the slides? Just making sure. All right, cool. All right, let's blast off. Let's start with the why. So why is this such a hot topic? Why are you hearing about this all the time on LinkedIn and on TV and in the workforce? Well, it's really obvious why, which is that 72% of executives say that talent gaps and labor market shortages represent the top business challenge that their companies face. Where about half of the CEOs that were surveyed in this report by the Boston Consulting Group and PwC, that specifically a lack of skills in the company's workforce was one of the factors that were inhibiting the companies from changing the way it creates, delivers, and captures value across a variety of different sectors. So you'll also notice that in every one of my slides, I reference my sources. I am a former science teacher after all. So who would I be if I wasn't citing my sources? So if you're curious where the data comes from, it's always at the bottom of the slides. So first, let's take a look at the current state of the workforce. So if you take 10 individuals, a randomly sampled 10 individuals from the workforce today, most of those individuals are going to change their careers around 5 to 7 times during their working life, me included. So I think I'm at number 6. So I've almost reached the top of that, but it's more average, more common than not. Also, what might be shocking is about 30%, about a third of workers are going to change their jobs this year. So if you get into a room and there's 3 people in the room, one of those people is going to get a new job this year on average. And this really creates unique conditions in the workforce today that can be addressed specifically through a shift to skills-based recognition, learning, and hiring. Next, let's take a look at the evolving skills. So coincidentally, the average job description in the United States lists about 10 skills on it. But the problem with those 10 skills is about 3 and 4 of them, or 75, 76%, have changed. And they change every 3 years or so, maybe 2 years, depending on technology disruption like AI. But about 3 out of 4 of those skills are going to change completely between periods. Also, about 1 in 4 of those skills that you'll find on the average job description, about 25%, are brand new. So think about things like AI, think about things like cloud, think about things like collaborating virtually, all these sorts of things that just, happen all of a sudden, and the jobs need to change as a result. What's more interesting to me is that those two numbers are velocities. The third number here, 3 and 4 of the jobs changing more between 2019 and 2021 than in the previous 3-year period, represents an acceleration of those first two values. So new skills and different skills, and the rate of change is increasing over time. So now I'm really curious, what are learners doing about this, right? Are they just kind of losing their jobs? I don't have the right skill, they walk out the door? No. So more than half of learners in the workforce right now are what we consider professional learners, in the sense that they've engaged in some professional development this year. Sometimes it's compulsory. If you're an educator like I was, you need to get CEUs and recertification on an annual basis. This is similar in other jobs throughout the field, but this 6 in 10 applies to the labor force broadly. So even if you're not required to go through an annual training, it really is imposed on you through the state of the workforce to make that happen. And learners are really looking at lots of different options: short courses, accelerators, boot camps, online learning programs, micro credentials. There's a whole portfolio of opportunities that have become available, especially with the proliferation of online learning. But I'm really curious what the impact of that learning is. And about half of those professional learners that we just looked at are going to experience a positive impact in their employment the very year that they engage in that professional development. So it's not that they're just learning new things, it's that the things that they're learning, their experiences they're having, are elevating their career in real time. Also, about 4 in 5 of those adults that we call lifelong learners plan on engaging on this type of professional development every single year. So this is not going to change. And you're going to hear me use the word lifelong learner a lot, because the way that we're thinking about, when learning happens and where learning happens is really changing, and has changed relatively dramatically, not just because of the pandemic, but even before that. And it's certainly going to be the trend from now on. So I wouldn't throw a bunch of numbers at you without some key takeaways. Like I said, I was a science teacher after all, so I know better than to assume that the numbers are really having the impact. So here's just some quick ideas that wrap up some of the why. So the learning landscape is fluid. Traditional education pathways are really having a hard time keeping up. Learners are already adapting to the change. Employers really need that agility in addition to the institution and the learners themselves. And the goal here should really be economic resilience. So now we're going to really throw it into hyperdrive. So my company does 4 things. We do strategy, execution, support, and storytelling. Those are the necessary professional services to facilitate a systems change. And we've done this for hundreds of organizations over the 10 years or so that I've been doing this. So what is a micro-credential? This is the #1 question that I've gotten over the last 10 years. And this is kind of a 2-part definition here. The first part is from UNESCO, and the second part is from Deakin University, which was used to inform national frameworks in Australia and Europe. So these are vetted definitions. And that first part of the definition, around it being a certification of assessed learning, really has 3 components. So micro-credentials are generally short, they're rigorous, aka they are assessed, and there are a variety of ways to assess depending on the stakes. And then finally, they're aligned to some industry standard, they're aligned to some industry need. The second part of the definition is more of a technical definition. Micro-credentials as digital objects are generally portable, interoperable, and verifiable. This isn't true for all ecosystems, but it should certainly be the goal. Now, why would you go through all of this time and effort? It's really to facilitate that conversation between the learner and the employer. The learner is communicating that they have a particular set of verified skills that they'd like to apply professionally. And the employer is really asking themselves, how can I find that team member who has that specific set of skills? How can I trust that set of skills, specifically towards helping me conduct business? So we talked about the what, let's talk about the who. So there's really three key stakeholders in most micro-credential ecosystems: learners who are earning digital credentials from issuers in recognition of their growing skills, and then they're sharing those digital awards with employers for some career opportunity. The second key stakeholder here are issuers, which mostly are institutions, but they don't have to be institutions. There are a lot of non-institutional micro-credentials that are being awarded, like, for example, through BCSI, my colleague, Angela, who's going to talk a little bit more about her work. And then the third major stakeholder here is employers. I like to call those recognizers. They're on the demand side of the equation. So where the supply is coming from institutions and subject matter experts and assessors, the employers are really embedding that value. So if I give you $1 and you have nowhere to spend it, then it has no value. So if you award a micro-credential and it's recognized by one or more employers, then suddenly that credential has real tangible value for the learner. These aren't the only stakeholders. So there are other stakeholders that I call ecosystem enablers, and they include insight enablers like me, consulting firms, technology enablers, system enablers, financial, and government enablers as well. So there are a lot of folks kind of involved in facilitating this shift to skills-based learning, recognition, and hiring. And I think I hit my time perfectly. This was a really quick overview. I have a bunch of information that I can share following the presentation, but I wanted to keep this short and sweet. We talked about the why, we talked about the what, and we talked about the who. Those are the three major components here. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague.
Okay, thank you so much. That was great, Robert. You can see he does a great job giving you this big picture overview. And now I think we are going to hear from two folks that are in the space, in different areas of this space. So Sonia, I want to start with you. You're at IBM. Everybody knows Big Blue, one of the most storied companies. It's over a century old. I mean, you go through all the inventions from that IBM has. It's insane. And I understand, like, why is IBM using SkillsBuild? How does this come into your work? Not as a way to, attract talent and bring new talent in the organization, which you certainly could do, but from where you sit, you're doing it for social impact, for social good. Can you share a little bit about that rationale and how that looks?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Ted, and welcome to all our participants today. IBM's got a long history. As you said, IBM's a 112-year-old company, and we've got a long history in supporting education through our work. The talent gap is really one of the biggest challenges that are facing not only businesses today, but societies in general, right? So we saw coming out of the pandemic, the countries that had a higher rate of people who had access to education bounced back a lot faster. I know Robert called it economic resilience. I think it's just resilience in general. And so, we've seen, if you look at statistically, we've seen that the number of available jobs has really doubled since 2021. But the applicant pool has gone down by 25%. And so really, IBM is investing in the future of work from a holistic end-to-end ecosystem way, which really fosters access to education and training. So this unique vision really encompasses the social impact programs like SkillsBuild, but we also address it on talent attraction, which is what we do through a lot of our apprenticeship programs, tech reentry programs, and then also from a policies perspective. And IBM is really a significant advocate on skills first issues and advanced technologies that we know empower transformation of economies and societies in general. And it's this ecosystem approach, which, that is really fueled our aspiration to democratize access to technology training, not only within IBM, but globally. And that's what, was the reason why IBM committed to skilling 30 million people by 2030 globally. And as of our most recent impact report, we've already reached 11.5 million learners globally. So I'm happy to talk more about SkillsBuild as we go ahead.
Great. Do you want to cover that, or do you want to wait? I mean, you're welcome to sort of go into SkillsBuild if you want.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So SkillsBuild really is our education corporate social responsibility program. We approach it in two different ways. So one is an online platform play. Anybody can access skillsbuild.org. I shared the link in the chat. Create an account. I know Robert had, Ted had mentioned we address high school students and educators, post-secondary students, faculty, as well as career skillers, upskillers. We really do focus on skills. And when we think about skills, yes, we're a technology company, but that's not all we do. So we start with professional skills because we think those are the most important ones that are going to drive career resilience. And then we also do ways of working skills. And then finally, technical skills, of course. So besides a platform, getting access to content, there are thousands of courses there in up to 19 different languages. The platform itself is available in 8 different languages. The other way that we do work is through partnerships. So in the United States, you can think of partnerships like the Veterans Affairs. We have partnerships with the Goodwill Industries. And that's when we do end-to-end program execution, when in addition to getting access to content, you also get the opportunity to work with IBM volunteers. Because one of the things that we did a survey with Morning Consult last year, and I'll go ahead and put a link to the survey results. One of the things that we found was, in addition to people, just not having access to education, they also didn't know where to start. And that's a very critical thing. And the other thing was that people didn't have what we call the occupational identity. Like, can I see myself as a cybersecurity analyst or a data operator? And I think that's one thing that we address through our network of IBM volunteers who can coach them, who can inspire people. If you can see it, you can be it. If you see a person like Sonia, who's at IBM and is a tenured person for 28 years, I can do that too, right? And so we really look at that end-to-end program execution, which includes IBM volunteers and is really curated to the specific needs. Because what are transitioning, as an example, what are transitioning veterans going to need to settle into civilian life is very different from, let's say, what a Title I high school is going to need in New York City. Very different needs, both from a content perspective as well as a support perspective. And that's what a partnership through SkillsBuild offers in addition to content. So I'll stop there and we can talk more as we progress.
Yeah. So you basically, there's a there's skillsbuild.org. You can go to that experience. But then when you have a partner where you can get some scale, y'all will sort of be able to, justify an investment to make a more end-to-end product, right?
Right. And really work with them to curate a learning experience, which is in line with also the employer ecosystem on the ground. Because at the end of the day, it's all in service of a job, right? So we want to make sure that we're building skills which are aligned to the jobs on the ground. Now, one of the things that we do, since this is a credentialing webinar, one of the things that we do is we offer micro-credentials along the way. And IBM's got a long history. I was part of the IBM training group when we first did a pilot back in 2016. When we first introduced badges at that point. And the results that we saw were really phenomenal. They were great as an organization that's trying to drive lifelong learning in people, because you get motivated, you get a credential, it recognizes you, it encourages you to learn more. But we've also seen from, just people who have credentials tend to stay longer, they tend to perform better. And then we've seen fantastic opportunities for them as far as career development is concerned. And so all our programs offer the opportunity for people to stack their credentials and really demonstrate their skills in service of all the narrative that's out there and organizations that are starting to do skills first hiring. How do you showcase your skills? Credentials are really the only way you can showcase your skills before you get into the room and have an opportunity to talk to someone and really demonstrate that, right? How do you get your foot into the door? That's what micro-credentials do. And that's what we really support through our programs.
Thank you very much. That's great. And that's actually a great segue to Angela and the work that she's doing with BCSI. I would say, Angela, that BCSI is the little engine that can and has done and continues to do in this world at micro-credentialing space. And I know you can give some background on the history, but we met about 2 years ago. I remember we were out in at Skyline College in San Bruno, California. And, you've just had this incredible growth since then in terms of, folks using BCSI to help their students demonstrate their skills so that they can get employment. But really also that work that Sonia was talking about is like getting those employers to come to the table and say, okay, we're going to accept these. And that's tough. So I mean, kudos to you. And I know you're trying to get more companies to do that, but I think it's really impressive. And this is obviously one of the high growth industries across both bioindustrial manufacturing and biopharma. And there's just an incredible amount of possibility. And we're going to need more and more people to do this, and you're helping do that. So happy to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for inviting me, by the way. And thank you to my fellow panelists for the great wisdom and information, because you kind of teed me up. I don't have to do the education piece now, right? Now everybody knows what micro-credentials are, and everybody has an understanding of kind of the motive force behind this movement. I heard you refer to IBM as Big Blue. Well, BCSI would be small, black, and white. So we're a very small nonprofit organization operating out of Kansas City. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the organization. We started in the middle of the pandemic. So I'm going to share a slide just because that way you're not just watching my head talk. Here we go. So this is me, and these are all the people that I'm currently working with within this space. But this is my favorite slide that I like to show, because this is where it all began. In 2019, I was teaching at the Kansas City, Kansas Biomanufacturing Training Laboratory, which was, again, the program created by the NSF-ATE. It's a dual enrollment program in Wyandotte County, which is one of the most urban and one of the poorest counties in the state of Kansas and in the city of Kansas City. This is my class, the final class that I had at that course prior to the pandemic shutdown. All of these students are taking biomanufacturing courses. Now, here was the problem we had identified. They would complete this course, and by the end of the course, they knew how to do some extremely technical things. I won't go into those things because it's not that audience, but trust me, highly technical instrumentation that services the biomanufacturing and biotechnology career sector, but they could not get jobs, even though I could show that their skills outstripped the average bachelor's degree candidate who was graduating from other schools like KU and K-State in the area. Those schools don't have the lab time to do the intensive work that we were doing. So I was very frustrated with this problem. I didn't realize at the time that I was tapping into a problem that was actually a national problem, or a problem that was about to become an emergent problem post-pandemic. All I knew is I wanted to get these kids jobs and that they deserved to be working in science because they already had skills in many cases that outstripped my own. I always like to say no one can pipette like an 18-year-old boy because they've got very agile thumbs from game controllers. So they already had really highly polished skills, and I needed to find a way to get them recognized for those skills. So what we did after the shutdown, suddenly we had the time to begin working on this problem. So we went to companies and we said, what if we use these digital badges to convey skills? What if I give these students badges and then you'll know they have skills? And they said, but will we? How will we know? Because you said so? And so it was back to the drawing board. No, not just because we said so. So how do we know they have skills? We got together with academics. How do you know your students have skills? Well, we do practical testing, which means they have to do the skill in front of someone. And while that person's watching, they confirm that they have mastery of that skill. And that was the beginning of it all. So next thing we knew, we had created a nonprofit organization called the Bioscience Core Skills Institute. We began to design highly polished rubrics and assessments to assess skills in service of the biotechnology and biomanufacturing workforce sector. And we tested these in front of industry. I have an extensive national industry advisory board that includes Thermo Fisher, MilliporeSigma, LabConco, very large multinational companies that do the hiring in this space. And what we would do is we would bring students in and have them perform the skills in front of industry trainers while the industry trainers held the assessment rubric in their hand. And then we would ask them for feedback. Are we capturing mastery for you? And that's the industry buy-in piece that Ted was just talking about that is so important. If you do not have assessment to confirm the skill, and you do not have industry recognition of the credential, you end up with what Robert said, which is you've now given them currency and nothing to spend it on. The currency has no value in the marketplace. So you must create that value with that industry buy-in. So that's what we did. Now I want you to keep an eye on this kid up here. This is Oscar Ramirez in my final class that I was teaching. We went through an entire year of development and created an entire series of micro credentials, which is the top line that you see on your screen right now. These were the skills that our industry determined they wanted to see walking through the door as a biotechnician from day one, that they wanted confirmed. Our second tier was created in year 2 in service to some of the extensions beyond that first tier that we began to identify in highly specialized industry. So these are our most popular badges. We now have 14 total skills badges, and we have 19 additional ones in development to service this industry. The wonderful thing about these as a tool for students, it not only confirms their skills and allows them to convey them into the marketplace, but it also allows them to learn how to use the vocabulary from industry. So whereas formerly, when I would graduate a student from this program, they would say, I know how to pipette, which is a form of measuring very small volumes. That's not what industry calls that. Industry calls that small volume metrology. Once a student takes and passes our tests and earns one of these badges, in mock interviews afterwards, we have confirmed they now say, I'm certified in small volume metrology. And that lands different during an interview. That's a strong signal of professionalism and mastery. So there are all these kind of unusual and unexpected outcomes that come from having these credentials. It confirms self-efficacy, it confirms science identity, it gives them confidence that their skills are what the company is looking for, so they know they're ready for work and they know they're ready for hire. But from an employment perspective, they are very strong signals of professionalism and hiring readiness because they have these highly polished skills. So one of the things that Ted asked me to talk about today was, how does this work with industry and how's it working out? What are the boots on the ground saying? And that brings us back to this one right up here. This is Oscar Ramirez. He's the first kid we ever tested. So you remember I said we tested in front of industry? It takes a really intrepid kid to get up in front of an entire room full of industry professionals and perform these skills while being assessed by all of them. This was the guy. So Oscar, also during the pandemic, after he took our skills test, reached out to me and he said, is there work that I can do? I want to get a job. I'm bored. I miss lab classes. I hate Zoom. I want to get a job. Is there work? And I said, MilliporeSigma is looking for someone to weigh powders. Are you interested in doing that? He was like, I'll go check it out. So he went to, this is a large multinational corporation, and interviewed and got a job running a giant scale and weighing powders all day. Later that year, of course, we did the testing. He started to confirm his skills, but he was still working for Millipore. They ran an internal advertisement that they were looking for a quality control microbiologist. And he noticed that the skills that he had earned in his badges were the same skills they were looking for. But there was a problem. They required that he have a bachelor's degree to interview. Now, this kid's only finished high school. He's got no degree, let alone a bachelor's degree. But being the self-advocate that he is, he walked into the HR and he asked them to waive the bachelor's degree requirement and interview him for that position. He's in year 3 as a quality control microbiologist for MilliporeSigma, one of the largest biologic supplies manufacturers in the world. And he has a high school diploma. And that's the real power. That's the boots on the ground power of micro-credentials. And that's why we do this work. And with that, I'll pass it back to Ted.
That's an awesome story. Get my camera on. Thank you very much. I've heard it before because I've heard you speak, and that was like one of the reasons I really wanted everybody else to hear the story, because it really is, it's working. You know, it's a proof point. And I think all of y'all are doing amazing things. And I think there is a ton of enthusiasm around this space. I mean, if you look at any SHRM or HBR or any of these magazines, skills-based hiring or Fast Company, or you name it, this is the topic that a lot of folks are talking about, because we we need more people to enter into the knowledge economy. But I think there is a little bit of an unlock that folks have to take in understanding, like, what is this real, like, what is this, why is skills-based hiring so promising, and what does it have? And I think one of the things that I've been encountering a lot in the sort of trade press is you might have buy-in at like a C-suite level, but then hiring managers kind of go, I don't know about this, because there's this notion that talent acquisition is maybe more of an art than a science, and this isn't really going to work for us. But can you talk a little, give your pitch as to why, I don't know, whoever wants to, like, what's the real benefit to an employer around skills-based hiring? Go ahead, Angela.
So I'll go first, just because, this is, I think, the most exciting thing about skills-based hiring, which is that there's a lot of great reasons for understanding the kind of granular detail of the talent you have coming through the door. But it's not just that. If you've identified your employees by their personal inventory of skills, you now have an aggregate inventory of the skills that you possess as a company. You can move people around very fluidly. they're no longer locked just into their job description. They're now available to you. I'll give you a weird example. I speak fluent Icelandic. There is no reason for anybody to need that until they do. But as a college biotechnology professor, are they going to know that they have someone that does this weird thing? If you disaggregate a person into the skills that they possess, you can use all of their value. So dollar for dollar, it's a great value proposition. As well, needless to say, there's an enormous amount of pressure on hiring managers to diversify their workforce. This allows you to consider someone strictly for their value to the company. No other traditional proxies will block their way, allowing you to tap into that highly skilled workforce that's out there that we know do not have all of the traditional degrees or the traditional certifications, but they do have the skills. I saw something really powerful on LinkedIn this week where someone shared a scene from The Bear, where Tina from the kitchen, it shows her backstory, and she's sitting with an interviewer and she says, I've been doing this job for 15 years, this exact job. And the interviewer said, yeah, well, I'm sorry, we require everyone to have a bachelor's degree. That happens every day to students in community college. I talk to them all the time. They've worked their way up and they get laid off and they cannot get another job because they don't have the minimum requirement, even if it's a job they've just been doing and they have all the skills. And that's the real power here.
So Sonia, I see you nodding your head and raising your hand.
Yeah, I mean, it really resonates with me. And I've had the same thing happen to a colleague of mine, right? So at IBM, we used to have a bachelor's degree as that initial gate for the longest time. I had a colleague who came in through an acquisition, and then she left for some time to take care of her family member. And when she tried coming back into IBM, because there was this bachelor's degree requirement, she couldn't. And that just boggled our minds completely, right? Because she had been a long-term IBMer. And so IBM, eliminated the requirement of a bachelor's degree about, I want to say 7 years ago. And so now more than 50% of the entry-level jobs at IBM no longer require a bachelor's degree. And going back to your comment about talent acquisition specialists, it's now built into our system. So as a hiring manager, when I'm filling in a requisition, a pop-up comes up saying, are you sure you need a bachelor's degree for this job requisition? And so it forces you to kind of think through what are the skills that you need as opposed to using a degree as a proxy for those skills. And then the other thing that we have started doing is a lot of behavior-based interviewing, right? So again, the only way that you can really get to know people's skills beyond the resume, and which I think is a lot more important, is doing that behavioral interviewing. I know a lot of people love certificates, and I keep telling everyone, certificates, those paper certificates or course completion certificates. I'm like, yeah, those are great, but they're those things on your wall that only people who walk into your room can see. If I'm not in your room, I can't see that wonderful degree that you have framed up sitting on your wall. And so I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done from the HR systems perspective, from talent acquisition perspective, and also for institutions like us that issue credentials to really make sure they are resume worthy. And so employers have the ability to trust them and accept them for employment. So definitely a lot of work to be done. But I think, collectively as a system, we need to work together to really drop the transparency to showcase a whole person with their skills.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't know, Robert, if you wanted to jump in too.
Yeah. So I really appreciate what Angela and Sonia just said. And I think that the value proposition for employers, actually, this might be my moment to show off another slide that I didn't show. It was in the bonus slide section of my presentation. So there's probably about 20 bonus slides that I didn't get to go through, but I always like having bonus slides because everyone likes a prize at the bottom of the box, right? That's why we buy cereal and Cracker Jacks. So I went ahead and I aggregated some of the very high level problems that are faced by employers, specifically around finding talent, reducing the time and cost associated with their existing or their evolving talent pipeline, enhancing the productivity of their existing employees for internal professional development systems versus external professional development or skills-based systems that kind of face outwards. Also increasing retention. So, I mean, it costs a lot of money to hire somebody. Interviewing and training and all these, you got to hold on to them. So for these internal professional development systems, as the companies change, as the economy changes, holding on to those people is exactly what skills-based ecosystems are really good at. And then finally, adapting to change. So, there are disruptions on a quarterly basis, annual basis. Who saw AI coming last year, right? Like, I mean, it's on every single job description now, and it's fundamentally changing the way that business happens. It's going to increase the overall GDP of the United States by around 54% over the next few years, and most of those gains are going to be made in employment. So another thing I wanted to add just really quick is that most people in the United States don't have a college degree, but 2/3 of well-paying jobs, i.e. jobs over the state average, require a college degree. So this is kind of like the Red Queen problem. You run as fast as you can to stay where you're at. So the only way to get ahead is to really adapt the kinds of systems that are going to be able to evolve in real time. So I just wanted to mention those things. I'm keeping things kind of high level here, but there are some very good specific examples from the field I'd be more than happy to go into with folks after, when we have more time.
So, Robert, you also bring up a really good point, though, which is that's something that Smart Resume is kind of working on. Here's the other problem with AI. It's not that it's showing up on job listings, it's also writing their resumes. So they showed that just in the first quarter of the last year, the workload to process resumes has gone up over 600% because every resume coming in looks like every other resume coming in. There's no differentiation between them. So calling all of the references and sorting through the terminology to determine if the applicant even understands the vocabulary on the resume is becoming an enormous source of labor for HR professionals around the country. So micro-credentialing, because they're verified by a third party, allow you to sort through those resumes by searching by skill, by verified skill, and access your talent in a very granular way. So yet another way that AI is kind of informing on the value proposition for companies.
Awesome. Yeah, it feels like I heard something this week talking about like the change in the election dynamics. And they referenced a quote by Ernest Hemingway who says bankruptcy comes in two phases, a slow one and a very quick one. And then, folks have said that, that happens with, sort of authoritarian regimes, but it sometimes feels like good things. You have to build this infrastructure. And, as we look at like the communications period of stakeholders, like I think that the folks are starting to sort of grasp this as it's not the only thing. And sometimes that I think is a challenge we have as a country, particularly the United States does, where we just get obsessed with like, this is how it has to happen. And this is the only thing that can work. I don't think anybody on this panel would say micro-credentialing is the only way that we're going to, solve the talent, but it is a tool. What do you see as some of the major barriers, though, as we, like, is it that just helping people sort of understand the subtleties and how it can be used? But what do y'all think? I don't know who wants to take a stab at that.
I could take a quick stab. I think the number one barrier is de-risking this for companies. Companies are terrified of change. No one wants to be the first one. And so we have to be grateful for companies like IBM and Google who are stepping up and saying, you know what, we're going to do it. And statewide administrations. So in the public sector, we're seeing statewide them implementing this at the state level and pushing it out into their systems in that way. But it's just about de-risking it through education and helping them to understand methods and strategies, organizations like Robert's that can walk them stepwise through it as a project attack rather than attacking it in a sort of diffuse or ephemeral way.
Anybody else?
I would say as learners, I think even learners have a responsibility here. One of the most amazing things that we see with a lot of our learners is not recognizing what a micro-credential can do. So as an institution, people like Robert, Angela, we all can talk about micro-credentials. But we also have learners out there who do the learning, they do the work, and then they don't accept their credentials. And then they don't add their credentials to their LinkedIn profiles or to their resumes, and that makes work so hard too. So I think, again, there is work to be done, and there's so much of kudos to be given to organizations that have eliminated the degree requirements. But I think there's this recognition that is required from learners about the value of credentials so that they can wholeheartedly adopt it. And then, of course, there is work that needs to be done by learning providers such as IBM or Google or anybody else to make sure that the credentials that we're awarding are credible, resume worthy, so that they inspire the trust of employers. So I think it all goes hand in hand.
Robert.
Yeah, big surprise. I've got a slide for this. So this is complicated, guys. The learning curve is pretty steep. I'm not going to lie. And so organizations like mine demystify the space for institutions, organizations, corporations, governments, all of the folks in the who that I mentioned earlier. And one of the ways that we do that is by presenting folks with a real picture of exactly all of the different moving parts associated with a shift towards skills-based learning, recognition, and hiring. So credentials, micro-credentials, are only one part of the equation. There are also meso credentials, which are kind of like licenses, professional certificates, bigger than a micro-credential, but smaller than a full-blown degree, which I would consider a macro-credential. And all of these different learning experiences are stacked, like Sonia was saying, along learning pathways towards some career opportunity. And then we start getting into the conversation around digital wallets and learning and employment records and exactly what technologies are used to present that information to employers and to communicate those skills and competencies to applicant tracking systems. And then looking at the RPL, or the prior learning assessment, what I call recognition of lifelong learning, because RPL and PLA are really institutional statements. There are other experiences like military experience, work experience, like I don't watch The Bear, but my wife watches The Bear. So she would have loved that comparison, Angela. But like, if you've been doing the job for some amount of time, how do you recognize what you're already doing? And employers are starting to do that internally, and they're seeking folks with those sorts of recommendations. In fact, the whole technology stack behind this interoperable approach actually surfaces things like endorsements and recommendations and evidence and assessments, these sorts of things. But like I said, it can get complicated. So working with an organization that can really onboard your team and understand how your organization can specifically unlock value from this approach is a barrier. And so we're at the point now where there are a lot of great organizations that can facilitate this kind of demystification process, and we're one of them, and we work with some other great ones like Education Design Lab and Credential Engine. I mean, they're at Digital Promise. There are a lot of great folks in the space who can get you guys up to speed really fast. There's no reason to go alone, and there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. Like they say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Well, it's interesting as we look. I saw, well, I think Sonia, your colleague Lydia Logan, was on a webinar earlier this year on skills-based hiring, and they were talking. I think it was Maryland, and how it was Larry Hogan and now Wes Moore, Governor Hogan. You don't see this very often, where you have a governor of one party change to another party, and they say that was a good policy, we're going to keep it. Usually it's the other way. Are y'all? Can y'all? I mean, so Maryland is certainly a place where there's a policy imperative, or maybe not imperative, but a nudge to try this out. Are there any other places that are that are, like, I think New Jersey maybe, or are there some places where you're seeing this kind of come to the forefront in political dialogue?
So I think Colorado has it. In fact, we just released last week, we released two credentials on data analytics and cybersecurity, which have been recommended for up to 12 credits by the American Council of Education. And we had 4 state systems, community college state systems, sign up to offer these credentials through their community colleges. And so Colorado, Alabama, California, and Louisiana were 4 of the community college state systems that signed up to offer them. So I think there are a lot of, I think it's up to 25 states right now that have eliminated the degree requirement and are open to accepting skills.
Cool.
Yeah, the last citation I can find is 16 states. And that was 2022. So you could absolutely be right, Sonia, which is amazing.
Yeah, I think it's 25 now.
And I mean, I don't know if y'all know this, but there's an election this fall, and I think issues like this are interesting. I think this is a place where we really are looking at substantive policy issues that are going to make people's lives better. And voters, I hope, will inform themselves, and policymakers will like talk about issues like this in ways that really are constructive. And we're seeing movement from, this is a rare glimpse of bipartisanship, from the policy side where this is happening. So just want to point, since we were right at the end, and I think we've kind of covered things. I've been keeping an eye on the Q&A box, but I think the audience has felt like we're keeping things moving. But we're down to our last couple of minutes. So obviously Micro Credential Multiverse, sorry, I'm getting it mixed up, but is a great resource. And so Robert's Micro Credentials for dummies, if you will, is, like, I think a great place to start. But can y'all, and we will send an email with references. I think Sonia has a handout, and Angela does too. Where are some places you would point people to if they're trying to kind of maybe implement this in their organization? Maybe, if you're a college or an employer or a school district or whatever, where would you point people to?
If I'm the one doing the pointing and you're a large organization, because the reality is, underpinning a change like this, you're going to need very strong project management. I would point you to Robert, and I always do. That I work in very niche, very focused area, but I've seen his work, and the quality of just managing expectations and managing change is inordinately tough. And I would point you at his organization.
I'm happy to chat with anybody who is interested in learning a little bit about how IBM implemented credentials for their learning. So happy to talk about that. I did put in my LinkedIn in the chat.
Cool. Let me add one thing is, I guess the first stop would be a product agnostic or vendor neutral provider. So there are a lot of great companies that have a lot of great products, but one of the things that is our competitive advantage is the fact that I don't sell any products. So I literally cannot sell you a badging platform or anything like that. And I think it's really important to go along the way with someone who is not going to have that conflict of interest. It's critical. So like whether it's a nonprofit that you might be going to or an organization like, again, Credential Engine and Education Design Lab, MCM, my company, like there are lots of folks that you can kind of start with and then surface examples and case studies that are going to support your specific implementation. And the devil is in the details. So the project management and execution is where most of the projects don't get out of the pilot stage. So finding a great partner for doing that digital transformation and change management is also really critical.
Okay, on that note, we are going to wrap it up. Please feel free to reach out to any of us. Also, one other thing, October 9th and 10th is the STEM Innovation Forum. This will be one of myriad topics of this type discussed, and would love to welcome you all. Just go to STEMinnovationForum.net that we're producing with Battelle. We'll have states from around the country. So thank you all very much for joining, and yes, keep tuning in for STEMconnector webinars.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks
Bye.
for having us, Ted. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.